Welcome, everyone. I now call the December 3rd, 2024 regular City Council meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. At this point, we'll take a moment to take roll of the council members by position number. Please say here when the city clerk calls your name. City clerk?
Thank you. Councilmember Zorns?
Here.
Mayor Thompson?
Here.
Councilmember Alderk?
Here.
Councilmember Card?
Here.
Councilmember Menke?
Here.
Councilmember Dodd?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Here.
All present.
Thank you. Before we continue with the rest of the agenda, I'd like to reiterate some guidelines. For remote meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. Mute your microphone when not speaking. And for council attending remotely, use the raise hand feature when you wish to speak. First up is meeting agenda approval. Are there any changes to the meeting agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to public engagement opportunities. We have the Career and Law Enforcement Workshop on Wednesday, December 4th from 6 to 8 p.m. in the Police Department Community Room. You can join Bothell Police for a free, no-pressure workshop that demystifies the law enforcement hiring process. Registration is required. We have council conversations this Thursday, December 5th from 4 to 6 p.m. at the North Creek Schoolhouse at Centennial Park. It's an informal event to chat and connect with city council members in a casual conversational setting. Refreshments will be served. We also have a tenant protections focus group for landlords Monday, December 9th from 5:30 to 7 p.m. at City Hall, room 107. If you rent out an ADU, duplex, townhome, or other type of property in Bothell, we're seeking your feedback on potential tenant protections being considered in Bothell, and please sign up to participate. All right, next up is public comment. The city has accepted public comment in writing as well as accepted sign-ups for those who wish to speak at tonight's meeting. Written comments submitted to the city clerk no later than 3 p.m. today were forwarded to all city council members and are part of the record. When the clerk calls your name, you will have 3 minutes to speak. Please note that council will receive your input, but we do not engage in discussion of these topics. Staff will make note of items requiring follow-up. City clerk?
Thank you. Before we call for the people that signed up to speak tonight, I'm going to go through the written comments. We received written comment from Mary Farley regarding density rezoning and the 102nd Bridge. Paul Dunham wrote in regarding the comprehensive plan. Judy Grayton wrote in regarding the comprehensive plan, as did Chris Jones. Paul Wickman wrote in regarding Lot P South. Justin Beaufort wrote in regarding the comprehensive plan. Tim Jackson wrote in regarding the comprehensive plan. And Christine Wickman wrote in regarding the comp plan as well as Lot P South. All those were sent to council. All will be made part of the record. Next up, we have 4 people signed up to speak this evening. When I call your name, please step to the podium, state your name for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes. But before I begin, I want to say that public comments shall be limited to the topics concerning current, future, or requested city projects, actions, programs, plans, and regulations. Comments not pertaining to these subject matters are not germane and may result in the speaker's comments being suspended. First person I have is Paul Dunham.
Hello. Good evening, Mayor Thompson, council members, and fellow Bothellians. I'm Paul Dunham. My wife and Lori and I have lived here a bit over 20 years, and I've worked here closer to 40. Before we moved to Bothell, we had a small dump on a big lot 10 miles north of here. We loved our big lot, but wanted to live where we could walk into town. At the end of a 2-year hunt, we found our place in Bothell, where we've been since. We love having a big yard where we could play with our daughter and dogs in the trees and dirt and the sun and the rain. We met our next-door neighbors immediately. They'd built their house soon after World War II using timber from the property. They raised their family and lived there long enough to see mature trees grow back. We learned from the man that when sewers were brought in, he resisted. In the end, he had to sell some of his property to pay their assessment, and it stuck in his craw, even though he still had an acre. The Greek philosopher Heraclitus, I can't pronounce that, Heraclitus, taught that change is a constant, that you just can't step in the same river twice. Our neighbor's acre is now 3 lots, and new families live there. They have stepped into a new river and are enjoying the waters as they found them. They look at our big lot and imagine, with understandable horror, the possibility that my wife and I will cash out to a developer who will change the course of their river. I'm fearful of change too, but resigned to its inevitability. It's possible for change to be palatable so long as it isn't drastic or unexpected. We've anticipated zoning changes and recently came here for a discussion of middle housing. At that time, it seemed like Bothell was pondering a change to allow ADUs. We thought that was a good idea. What's being proposed now seems to put that modest proposal on steroids. Don't know what happened. It took me a while to locate the definitions for RL1 and RL2. What I did find is in the Land Use 2024 document, but it's still vague. For one thing, in the lot size spec, the word minimum is replaced with typical. But I've never seen a sign on the highway that says 60 miles an hour typical. And the final square footage number seems to have been revised to the smallest of those under consideration. I wonder, were homeowners part of the process by which these edits were made? Are there other esoteric or aspirational criteria that will be applied? Affordable housing is a problem that's not unique to Bothell, and I know it isn't an easy one. My father was a teacher but was able to buy a home. We've seen a lot of houses built in our neighborhood in the last 20 years. It'd be nice to see a big one replaced by 3 small ones, but what we usually see is a small one replaced with 3 big ones. Builders are business people, and will build whatever delivers the best profit. If the market for McMansions and palatial apartments is there, that's what they'll build. I don't blame them. How could they be incentivized to build the homes that someone like my father could buy? That's the challenge of our age, and I hope you can rise to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Lyndon Morton. I don't see them online either, so I'll move on. Next, we have Mark Swanson, and I'm going to bring him in. He's virtual. Mr. Swanson, can you hear me?
I can, City Clerk. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Go ahead. You'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. So in 2019, there's an interview between Amanda Dodd and Carrie Westerbeck. It was the initiation of an organization called Bothellites for People-Oriented Places. Now, Karsten Kurd, Mason Thompson, Rami Alcabra, Jenny Alderks, and Amanda Dodd, and another one of the council members, all were part of the BOPOP club. They met in Bothell in person and discussed city matters. Now, this is a violation of the Appearance of Fairness Doctrine and the Open Public Meetings Act. And I have photographic evidence that shows that these things occurred. Now, having said that, I'm going to tell you that all of the former and current members of Bothellites for People-Oriented Places are violating, in my opinion, their public oaths of office to be impartial. Now, you may disagree with me, but that's how I feel. A 33-year resident who bought a house in 1994 up here on West Hill and have seen my neighborhood destroyed. Destroyed! Now, I don't care if Jenny Alderts calls me a bully. I don't care how many websites Amanda Dodd decides to exclude me from. Bothell Community being one. House Bill 1110 states that our population projection is to be taken from the Office of Financial Management, who in turn goes back to the GMA, and those charts are there. One of the things that we learned about in 2019 is that Christian Joyner, Pastor Christian Joyner, but then Deacon Joyner. Deacon, this is 5 years in the making. Now you're going to give Lot P
Thank you.
away.
Mr. Swanson, your time is up. Thank you. Next up, I have Patrick Ewing.
Good evening, Council. My name is Patrick Ewing. I hold in my hand the 2004 version of the Comprehensive Plan. This is a document very near and dear to my heart. We spent countless hours in meetings coming up with this document, working with our community. So in crafting this document, it's a lot of work. It was the first required major update of the comp plan. It went to the Planning Commission at first, and what the Planning Commission produced wasn't exactly what our council had in mind, because there was a recent election where I would characterize as we had maybe a council that was a bit more leaning towards development than the neighborhoods, and the new council was perhaps leaning more towards protecting neighborhoods than helping the developers. That's how I would characterize it in any way. So, went to the Planning Commission, which was created by the previous council, came to us, and we thought it needed some changes. And so council decided to take it on, the rest of the plan themselves, rather than sending it back to Planning Commission multiple times. Planning Commissions just issue recommendations, right? Council has the ultimate decision. So our council took it on, and it was a lot of work. It became clear there was a lot of stuff we had to get in that the state required. It became clear to us that we were going to miss the deadline. But we weren't the only city in that situation. A lot of cities were in that situation. So we did miss the deadline. We got it done in a couple months later with a lot of extra meetings we had to hold, outreach to the public. But we got it done. We didn't miss any grants. We didn't miss any grant cycles. We got it done. And so I would urge you, Council, you heard a lot of input in the last 2 weeks from your community. I really strongly urge you to listen to what they had to say and consider it. In doing so, I see a scheduling problem. If you really want to consider all of the input you got and come up, in my opinion, this plan is insane. It needs some changes. So please take the time, get it right. Don't rush this through, please. Please listen to your community. They really care about the character of their neighborhoods. That's why we put that language in this comp plan, to protect the character of existing neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. That is all I have signed up to speak. If there's anyone in the audience who wishes to do so, thank you. Please step to the podium, state your name. You'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Lori Dunham, and I live here in Bothell, and I echo what the gentleman just said. I just want the council to slow down and go through and make sure they're doing this in a way that protects the neighborhoods as much as possible and still gets us affordable housing. I'm a real estate agent, so today I spent a long time just going through and doing a broad look at new lots, just kind of scanned through. I did what has sold in the last year that was on small lots the, around that 6,000 and under the two that we're considering 3,000 to 6,000 kind of thing. And the median sales price of these new homes on these tiny lots is $1.2 million. And then I did the one for older lots, older homes, like 1965 and older, on the 8,000 to 9,000 square foot lot, and their kind of median price was like $900. So, if my math is right, that's about a 35% increase in what the ones on the small lots are selling for. So, and the two that stood out to me in the newer, smaller lots that did look affordable was a neighborhood off of Cascadian Way near Martha Lake, still a Bothell address, that those houses were about $675 for townhomes. And also a duplex where someone just took a lot and made a duplex on about a $4,000. So each duplex was on about $4,000. And I had a builder about 5 years ago tell us he wished at that time, 5 or 10 years ago, that he could have done a duplex instead of the big homes. So kind of a middle way, not so drastic, would be nice.
Hello, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. My name is Kristen Joyner, pastor at Bothell United Methodist Church and team leader for the Bothell Urban Project. I'm here to talk about AB 24-199 and the request for the extension of the time for negotiating the purchase and sale agreement for Lot P. I want to assure you that requesting the extension of the time period reflects the care and consideration that's going into the process. As someone told me recently, negotiations of this type with attorneys siding with each party spend more time negotiating what could go wrong than what we're doing right, and in typical developments can easily take up to a year. I will assure you that we and our selected partner, Bridge Housing, are aligned and on the project, and we expect a successful project, with a reminder that this is not a typical PSA. This PSA makes it clear that the city doesn't lose control of what happens on this property. This is not a typical PSA that allows a developer to go and change their mind after agreements have been made. This PSA will assure that the community benefits from this sale. So thank you, council members, for understanding that the investment of this property into a community gathering space will benefit the community for years to come. As we've been hearing over the past several weeks, there are community members that are passionate about a feeling of community and even an acknowledgement that housing that is affordable is lacking in our community. Our team, our Bothell Urban team, held a public event in September in addition to Summerfest and other outreach. And we passed out invitations to residents and businesses around Lot P, and that presentation can be found on our website. And it was very clear that those who attended this event were very excited to see a project in downtown Bothell that keeps city land for the benefit of the community. The public needs indoor gathering space that's integral to this project, and it answers a lot of needs and creates so much potential for building community here in Bothell. We'll get this done. Please approve the recommended action tonight for AB 24-199. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have one person in the virtual audience. I'm going to promote Tamara. And if anybody else in the audience wishes to speak, if you're online, please use raise your hand function. And anybody else in the audience, please step to the podium. Tamara, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm here.
Can you state your last name for the record, please?
Here, it's Tamara Wood.
Great, thank you. You'll have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Council. As a local land and watershed steward, student at UW, a mother, single-family homeowner, and citizen advocate, I hope that the Council doesn't consider the 11th hour intervention by NIMBYs to stop the comprehensive plan as it stands today, a testament of our collective values to imagine Bothell as a place of belonging for the next generation of citizens, a place for our children to hopefully call home. I'm extremely disappointed in some of my neighbors who have come to the previous council meeting calling for transparency. Where have you been? How could you not be informed about what is going on in your own city? Is it them or is it you? Because for the last 2 years, I've been bombarded with engaged Bothell outreach from inclusive open houses, tablings, information study sessions, city council meetings on YouTube, emails, online and in-person outreach, info walks, a citizen steering committee. What else do you want? If you never participate civically and care about your neighborhood, do the bare minimum. Show up, pay attention, do the work. It's not difficult. If you don't like something, recommend a compromising middle ground. Talk to city staff with your clarifying questions. You had 2 years to change and influence policy, but no, instead y'all arrive at the finish line with pitchforks and outrage and informed with misinformation. If you are claiming corruption, you hold the burden of proof. Show your receipts. If you have none, please save your breath and show up and participate at the next comprehensive plan review in 2033. I just want to point out as well that the call for preservation of single-family housing is clearly outlined in page 511 of Project 2025 that states that the Trump administration should oppose any efforts to weaken single-family zoning. Saving your ticky-tacky single-family HOAs by calling for character preservation is clearly a farce for deep-seated resentment of people of different classes and, frankly, xenophobic. We are better than that, Bothell. Thank you, Council, for listening, being intentional and mindful about the planning process, including the extensive outreach that has been made over the past 2 years. Please pass the comprehensive plan so we can get to work preparing Bothell for the next 20. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Justin Beaufort. I'm going to panel him in. Justin, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Go ahead. You'll have 3 minutes.
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that I sent a laundry list of just what I think are things that need to be possibly updated with the plan. For example, I believe RM1 has a 110 foot front yard setback. Obviously, that's a typo, but I went through the plan. I sent a pretty long list of things that need to be done. But the sort of takeaway is I think there should be probably stronger protections explicitly calling out ADUs. It's not super clear that I can add an ADU because it would expand the nonconformity. So I think that we shouldn't. If ADUs are a priority for the council, I don't know if they are, but as it stands right now, my reading is that the legal nonconforming status would possibly not allow ADUs, and I think if that's not what was intended, it should be clarified prior to adopting. The other things that I kind of pointed out were inconsistencies in parking enforcement, whether the bonus 2 units you can get in some of the RM things to go up to 6 units on, is it middle housing, is it multifamily? It makes a huge difference because of parking mandates, because the bare minimum number of parking spots for multifamily is 11, because you need 2 per unit plus 1 guest, and then you need some bike parking spots, if I remember reading the code correctly too. 11 parking spots is like 1,700 square feet of usable land that's just gone. So I would, again, very clearly clarify that if you want people to do the 6 units with 1 affordable, then it's clearly classified as multifamily. Otherwise, with 11 parking spots, it's quite frankly not going to happen. So I encourage the council to go through the message I sent. I encourage them also to remove the things that don't apply to single family, other things like having doors and windows face the street. Frontage is hard. There's a lot of depth to lots, but not so much frontage. And if you want a higher density building like a fourplex, then maybe it's gonna have to be on its side just so that setbacks can be met. But you can't just put a door in the front; it just won't work. So, don't add design elements that don't apply to single family homes and other things to make it harder to build. Anyway, I try to make a pretty cogent case. I do encourage council to read what I sent and make appropriate updates prior to the action next week. Thank you.
Thank you. That is all I have.
Thank you, City Clerk.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have reports, and we're going to start with the City Manager report. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and good evening, City Council. Tonight, under reports, we really have one item, and that is to follow up on what ended up being the last 2 weeks, but really the last regular council meeting of a public hearing on the comprehensive plan. I'm going to invite to the table Jason Greenspan, our Community Development Director, and Christian Getz, our Deputy Community Development Director. They're here tonight to report back to council on the themes that were captured from the public comment during the public hearings, as well as answer any questions that council may have. Again, as a reminder, the schedule for the comprehensive plan does reflect bringing forward the plan for adoption next week. So this has been an intended step before that meeting to hear any additional feedback the council might have. With that, I'm going to turn things over to our Community Development Director, Jason Greenspan, for a few introductory comments. And again, then staff will walk through some of the themes. Jason.
Thank you, City Manager. Good evening, City Council members, Mayor Thompson. As you know, we've sat at this table multiple times over the past couple of years to eliminate the comprehensive plan process, the code development process, and to get feedback on your priorities. We've also workshopped directly and often with the Planning Commission on the comprehensive plan and code updates at all stages in the process. Tonight, there is no action required or requested. We're here to review the main themes that emerged during the public hearing process and to clarify any remaining questions. To our review, those main themes really relate to four main areas: growth targets, residential density, intensity, and housing types, mobility, and infrastructure. And hopefully this level of review can inform your deliberations. And as mentioned, we are on track for action by the City Council next week on December 10th. And with that, I'll hand over to Deputy Director Christian Getz to get into a little more detail on that impressions that we had from the public hearing.
All right, thank you. Just to always reset ourselves and align with where we are in the final step of phase 4. This 2-year process, as kind of mentioned by one of the commenters, began back in 2023 with outreach, stakeholder interviews, a number of events, pop-up events, open houses. We worked through surveying and assessing the community, evaluating existing conditions, and establishing those land use alternatives. We worked through that draft plan, the draft EIS, and then sent that out looking for comments and additional engagement with the community. Came back with that preferred alternative that was worked through over the summer. And then settled into the last stage, which is get into the regulations, which is the finer details of all the work to create the community in the built environment from that policy to the regulation. So after the public hearing, as Jason mentioned, we just want to make sure we can provide information and clear up any confusion on some of these main themes to give you what you need to move forward with this. If we don't touch on anything that did come up in your mind, we're here to answer those questions. Starting with growth targets, looking at methodology, the GMA establishes the required housing targets. Those are pulled from the 20-year population projection from OFM, from the Office of Financial Management. Those are handed to the state. They are handed then to the counties, King and Snohomish. So we use those multi-county planning policies to establish what those growth targets are for our two parts of the city. So that's how we land on what it is. This round of the comp plan incorporated an equity lens, and the preferred alternative considered how to equitably distribute the housing growth throughout the city and spread that and disperse that throughout the city. And it blended, as you remember, the neighborhood and the center options. So not focusing everything within the centers and not everything within the neighborhoods, and blending blending the two to achieve those targets. We did receive comments from PSRC, other organizations like King County, the Housing Coalition, or Housing Committee, pointing to, by themselves, alternative 2 and 3 weren't enough. We needed that additional lift to blend them together, and then also increase some of our residential medium areas, which is kind of how we landed on that preferred alternative, to make sure there was adequate space to create that capacity. That preferred alternative was necessary to create that. I've kind of described it as that large capacity bucket. We don't know exactly how development will take place. The no action alternative that we heard a couple of questions about or comments about, saying there's enough capacity currently, that wasn't actually possible given what we heard, what we saw. We needed to create the additional capacity within the preferred alternative to account for and utilize the methodologies that the state and PSRC provide as guidance to anticipate that growth. We're unsure on how quickly things will redevelop. We also have a lot of critical areas that impact where growth can go. So that's kind of how we landed on the preferred alternative, and that and our density, our established density throughout the summer. That then led to the residential density, intensity, and types. What does it look like? How do we get there? So we generally base this on units per acre. Some of the zones establish a minimum lot size. We can calculate that into units per acre. The low density zones, for example, the RM2, the medium density zone establishes that maximum density of 50 units and a minimum of 25. We set that 50 based on the methodology to achieve our housing targets, our 2044 20-year housing targets. And what that looks like, the adjustments to the residential density provide a lot of different options, and I think that's where some of the confusion is. Is it middle housing? Is it more dense than middle housing? Is it less dense than middle housing? These options really do expand currently what's allowed within the residential low or residential medium zones, regardless of the zone. So it's created some of the confusion that we've heard. Can I do middle housing? Can I do an ADU? How do I do that if my density has grown to a point? So for those higher density zones, development will likely result in a more compact. We were anticipating that. The RM1s, the RL1 and 2s, we don't quite know exactly what they'll look like. More likely they will land in the middle housing realm. What's already allowed is 4 units per acre. And we want to make sure that we were clear in what could happen and couldn't happen, and that's where the nonconformance updates were revised.
You meant 4 units per lot,
Sorry,
right?
did I say per acre?
You did.
I meant per
I
lot.
just wanted to clarify because we've had a lot of conversation about units per acre.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry. So we updated the nonconformance section to specifically talk about density. So questions about if I have an existing home, I can't build an ADU or I can't do middle housing. The nonconformance section that we've included establishes that ability to add an ADU, add 2 ADUs, create a duplex within that existing home, and utilize what a lot currently has. It doesn't mean if it's sold you have to tear it down and rebuild to the density maximums. It establishes the ability to continue what's there, add to it, but if it is demolished and the land is scraped, then yes, that is the point at which the density minimums, if they were there, would come into play. The RM1 and lower, RM1, RL1, and RL2s, they don't have a density minimum. And so we don't know exactly what we'll see there. We might just see single-family home being removed and replaced with a single-family home. That's what our monitoring and our 5-year review will look to establish, are we on that right track? Are we on the right trajectory? But we wanted to make sure within the nonconformance section, we created that carve-out for existing homes to have or add 1 or 2 ADUs, and then potentially even do a unit lot subdivision where they could use that section of the code. Some questions around mobility, multimodal. Multimodal was the transportation element approach. It incorporates all types of transportation projects on that project list that both Planning Commission and City Council reviewed. This transition to multimodal policy is meant to result in that 20-year transportation improvement project, improvement plan that accommodates the growth where we're seeing it, where we're anticipating it. And like any CIP, it's always being reevaluated. So the list is there. It has been established and funded through the comp plan, through the CFP. And it incorporates more than just auto-centric design. It includes those bike and ped projects. Questions about infrastructure, frontage improvements, impact fees came up. Frontage improvements are required for every new development. It's dependent on the scale of that project. So an entirely new city block like Block D being built, yes, they're doing frontage improvement around their site. They take up the entire block. A single family home, their frontage improvement is right in front of that home. So yes, they may be required to install a sidewalk that starts and ends on their property, but over time, that sidewalk is built up and down the street, and eventually it connects. And this is a standard approach. Impact fees are assessed for all development types at the scale, again, for that development activity. Those are transportation, park, school, and fire impact fees. Schools, we do coordinate with North Shore. They set their school impact fee. They use that in their plannings, and they were well aware of the comp plan and what the projections are. They keep an eye on what comp plans are doing to know how many new residential units, what are the projections for new students, student enrollment, so that they can adjust and anticipate that growth. That's on them. We do initiate that impact fee process through the development permit, making sure that it's taken in, and then we hand that right off to the school district for them to utilize. And then I think the only other thing was on the transportation element on infrastructure and the capacity projects that were needed to support that growth. That prioritization is difficult to play out, but the projects that are on that 20-year roadmap are meant to accommodate growth and be built as that growth takes place over 20 years. So I don't know if I can say that enough times. It's a long-term 20-year plan for what we're projecting out. We can go back to questions on any other themes or topics. Actions for the 10th, we just want to make sure that this is in your minds. The comp plan, there'll be a number of ordinances that'll come before council. Comp plan will be its own ordinance, and then within the Bothell Municipal Code, there will be a series of 7 ordinances separating out various subjects, making sure that they're very, very clear between zoning code, administration, nonconformance. So that's our plan for bringing something back to you next week, but definitely here to answer any questions.
Councilmember Zorns. If you hit the button, I'm mostly scanning for the light.
I was busy scribbling, and I was hoping somebody was going to, kill some time for me while I finished my notes. Okay, I think I'm ready to go. So I have a few questions. One, if there's a home where there's higher density that can happen, RM1, RM2, and their home catches on fire, or there's an earthquake, are they allowed to rebuild that house? And what if there's landscape damage, or say they're on septic and now they want to go on sewer? At what point is it considered land scraping and they cannot rebuild that home?
Within the nonconformance code, there is a provision to allow for submitting a permit within 12 months of that fire, flood, earthquake damage to replace like for like.
Okay, good. Thank you. You were on it. And then I pulled a couple questions out of emails that were sent to us. So I hope, and I scribbled them down, so I hope that this can make sense. Somebody asked, what is the impact on property taxes for current residents? And I know as a council we've talked kind of around that before, but can you give an answer on what the impact on property taxes will be for people?
I don't think I can.
It isn't one of the considerations that goes into the comprehensive planning process.
Okay.
So it isn't really an answer we can provide to this.
So for some taxpayers with escalating property values happening around them, this is kind of scary. And I realize it's not the city property taxes that we should be so concerned about, that the school district has the major portion of our property taxes, but still, thank you for answering that question. And then someone was noting that the changes that were going to be applied to Maywood, were they based on existing zoning and proximity to services, infrastructure, and then what about were areas where potentially undeveloped land could be efficiently zoned to meet the objectives better than where there's already homes?
So the zoning, the name changes. So the slide from September and early October went through, if it was R8400 and it was in a new designation that's yellow, an RL designation, it would follow that RL1 or 2. If it was an 8400 and it was then designated to a medium density residential, it would then fall into that medium density residential zone. They were across the board. So if it, another example is if a lot was 5400, it went to RM3. So it wasn't picking and choosing one existing zoning to another. It was just looking down the list of, if you're this zoning and you're this designation,
and it goes,
then you become this.
Gets assigned
zoning.
this.
Yes.
And I don't have the map in front of me. I don't think it was in this packet, and I'm doing this from memory. But my memory is those zoning changes were mostly Maywood down towards downtown, that there were fewer changes the more we got closer to Canyon Park Middle School. Were there zoning changes?
The areas of change, I'm thinking back to that map that just highlighted what went from a low density residential to a medium density residential, goes from Lower Maywood up and over, west. They're within West Hill, up in Queensboro, down along the Kirkland border. So there were some significant swaths that were part of the low to medium density residential land use designation update.
Right, but we didn't, I'm thinking of West Hill as well, we didn't blanket the whole hill with that, just portions of the hill.
Right. Some remained in low density.
And was that part of the 2.5 version of this?
That was part of the, no, it was both within the future land use map, and this was part of the confusing aspect when I started, was the future land use map for both alternative 2 and 3 with those residential zone changes from low to medium were the same.
Okay.
And then throughout the preferred alternative conversations, the input from PSRC, from King County Housing, we included those R7200 zones in Queensboro and then down near Kirkland that were added to and increased in their designation from low to medium.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I think you've answered my questions. I just wanted to make a comment. I've lived in Bothell long enough since the last comp plan, and there are council members whose names still live in infamy from that experience. But one thing, and at the time, I have to tell you, at the time, it didn't feel like they were listening to us, and yet I know that they tweaked and made some accommodations for what the neighbors were asking for, and still put density. I'm talking about the downtown corridor, still put density in, but still made some accommodations for the people who were living around and in it. And I value neighborhoods. You know that I talk a lot about, can we build, what is as a council, how can we build community in our neighborhood so that we can do day-to-day life and also be there for each other when there's an emergency. And so I think I know neighborhoods need protection. And the one thing that I don't hear and I have not observed, and I would love for someone to say, yeah, it actually happened, is when neighbors came and gave input, the city said, and I'm using city, the big umbrella of planning commission and staff and council, said, you know, you have a point. We can't do everything you want, but how about we do this? And I have to tell you from my own experience of, the last comp plan, we felt shafted, but they gave us the bone and we were grateful for the bone. So I would like council to think about what the cost would be to postpone this for a couple months. I think the world's going to be spinning on the axis just fine. The sum of this comp plan is going to go through, but are there some spots where we can tell the neighbors, we'll soften the edge in this place for you? And that takes time and walking through it. But I think that's really important for honoring and respecting the people who call Bothell home. And my one other comment that I want to say is that sometimes, and I'm human too, I've probably been guilty of it as well, resort to shaming and name calling. And we heard some of that tonight, and that does not help the conversation. And it shuts down the conversation and it does not garner respect. So my request to the community at large, that when you want to name call or shame, show a little respect. These people have every right to live and have an opinion about Bothell as you do. So I'm done. Thanks.
Councilmember Mankey.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank staff for all the work that went into this. I know it was a lot. I also want to say I'm sorry that there were some personal attacks made on individuals on staff. To Councilmember Zorn's point, we shouldn't ever have that. Shouldn't have it against council either. And community members shouldn't be making them against other community members. So that part of this process has made me sad. I'll just say it, made me sad. However, I do want to talk about some of the concerns that were raised by community members. I know we've had a long process here. We've had many different points of engagement. We had those that were active and participatory in the middle, who helped direct some of this. And we also just had a 2 council meeting session where community members who saw the final plan have come and raised concern too, which I think is equally as important as those who are participating in the middle of the process. There's a reason why we do public hearings. We do public hearings not as a final Festivus, get it off your chest method of doing government. We do it to hear feedback from the community and get honest feedback, how people are feeling about what we'll be voting on very soon. And once we vote, it's in there, and it takes a lot more work to change it. So I do want to talk about a couple of things that were brought up as themes, most notably the growth targets and the residential density. I think those things came around near to the end of the process. It's after July when we looked at the alternatives, and then we started putting pen to paper and looked at numbers. And I think when you see them overlaid over neighborhoods and you look at the density minimums and maximums, it is a bit alarming. It's going to cause change in neighborhoods, and it may happen fast, it may happen slowly, but it's going to happen. We do need to prepare under state law, several state laws. We must prepare in certain ways to meet certain growth. So we are mandated to do that, but we do have an option in how we do that. And I think it's important to listen to the community and hear their feedback in how we do that. It's also important to consider others who will come here one day. We all came here one day, and it was because of changes like this that allowed housing to be built. So focusing specifically on those two things, the growth targets and residential density, I'm curious, with the minimums for RM2, I know why we have a minimum there, but I do have concerns about that restricting a property owner's ability to build what they want. They may want a larger lot. They may want to build a larger house. There may be a house there that is, 2,000 square feet, 1,500 square feet, built a long time ago, and they want to put something a little bigger and have a bigger family lot for a yard and, maybe an ADU in the backyard, and they're not able to do that under the current zoning regulations. So I do have a concern about the minimums on the RM2. Also the maximums, looking at the total projected housing units that we do need, we are putting in capacity for almost 3 times the required amount or what's being projected. I know there's reasons for that. I know if you just hit those targets, what they give you, you're not going to see and be able to meet those targets. So I don't know that a target of 1 is exactly what we want, but I don't know that 3 is either. So I am interested in revisiting those numbers for RM2, which we heard the most about. I don't think I heard very much about RM1 or the I'm going to butcher it, RL2, RL1, or even RC, or even RM4 for that matter. But I am interested in looking at the numbers for RM2, and especially, looking at the growth targets. About 7,500 of the units that we're expected to build are in the sub 50% AMI. And if we're really being honest about house building, we're not going to see those houses produced without subsidy from the government, from nonprofits. So to expect a builder to build those on residential lots that are selling at market prices, we can plan for it, we can zone for it, but they're not going to get built, and we're going to get something else other than what we would like. So I would really like to see us look at those specific things. I would like to see us consider those. I know we're running up on a deadline. I don't know what it looks like to reconsider those numbers and really dig into that a little bit more, but I think we should, based on the feedback from our community. Again, community feedback at any time is valuable, regardless of whether it's at the final public hearing or whether it's in the middle. We do need to consider it. And this was more turnout for any topic that I have seen in my 3 years on council, and that is saying something. We've had a couple of things that were, not easy to talk about, not easy to work through. We did have some good turnout, but this was by far the largest that we've had. So I am interested in looking at these specific things and addressing the specific concerns here. And I don't know what that looks like. Staff would have to kind of tell me more about what those things look like. But if there's a will of council, I would like to do that.
Councilmember Curd.
Thanks. Thanks for the presentation and for answering some of the questions that have come up. I just have a quick question, which is between a zoning map and a critical areas map, which one takes precedent?
The critical areas map.
So if someone has a steep slope on their property or a landslide hazard area or an erosion hazard area or a wetland.
Yes. If you had a 1 acre parcel and half of that acre was wetlands, wetland buffer, that half of the acre is taken out of that density calculation. Additionally, if you needed to dedicate roadways, additional easements for ingress, egress, or other means, those would be taken out of that calculation as well. So it chips away at the density calculation. So we can't just look at, the entire RM3 zone and say, well, here's what it would equate to in number of units, when most of that is going to be sloped along Bothell Everett Highway as it goes through Midtown. There's wetlands along there. So it peels a lot of that density capacity back. And that's part of the kind of that calculation of trying to figure out, well, where can we cluster it, and still they can build to that half acre of their density. But it's outside of those buffers. It's outside of those critical areas.
Right.
Yep.
I really appreciate the maps in the comp plan about critical areas, and just seems like a lot of, we live in a hilly area. There are a lot of steep slopes, a lot of critical areas, and so it's easy to look at the zoning map, flat and colorful, and get scared. But in reality, there are so many other things that go into the calculation of how many units are actually buildable on a lot. And so, thanks for that clarification.
Councilmember Aldrichs.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for coming to address the concerns of our community, especially since many of the concerns were coming at a very late date in this process. And that it was very clear from the comments that we heard last week that many people had not been following along through the 2-year course of discussion at the city. And I just am very cognizant of the, and please tell me this is a mischaracterization, but the hundreds of people who came together over the last 3 years to give feedback into the development of the comprehensive plan. Is that fair to say?
It's fair to say there were over 100 people at our open houses in May when the draft was.
And I'm also thinking of, like, when I look at the Engage Bothell platform, there's almost 400 people registered there who participated in some way, at least enough to register and possibly view the comprehensive plan documentation from when it was launched too, and it's been up and available all along. So I do not want a group of people who are coming in with less than stellar information to derail a process that has been going on and taking into hundreds of people's feedback over the course of the last couple of years. So I'm very aware that that I do not want to do a disservice to the people who are engaged and participating all along. So I'll just kind of preface it there. But then, based on your presentation tonight, I do have a couple of questions. So I want to make sure that there's clarity around the growth targets. And so please tell me if I'm characterizing this correctly. Those growth targets are designed to increase the likelihood that the targets will be met instead of relying on only creating goals that could be met if all lots redeveloped, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that means that people are then free under the comp plan to keep their property the same for as long as they would like to keep it the way that it is.
Yes.
Okay, and so no one is compelled to change their property. No one is forced to do anything with their property that they don't want to do for some reason.
Right, and that's part of that difficulty of that assumptions of that redevelopment pace.
And so and I've lived in this city since before the last comprehensive plan, and so I've seen how a plan is great because you can have projections and targets, but individual properties can choose what they do, and some people will sell, and that means that my neighbor might sell, but I didn't, and my property has stayed the same over the last 10 years, of the last comprehensive planning window. And I would think that many of our neighbors who have been here for a very long time, who are committed to keeping, their neighborhood as, as similar as possible to what they're used to, would not be motivated to change their property because they like it the way it is. So that to me relates to an idea of personal freedom, right? We're free to choose what we do with our properties as long as they are complying with the laws and we're not doing things that aren't allowed under law. But what I'm not a fan of is when I hear people try to impose their ideals, values, preferences onto what their neighbors' properties do, because their neighbors are just as free as they are to choose what they do with their property. So if my neighbor wanted to sell, and if whoever buys that property is free to do with that property what they wish, they can keep it the same, right? So my neighbor's house might not change at all, even though it sells. But if somebody comes in and decides that they want to, raze it to the ground and make an empty lot of it, then these new zoning regulations would come into play. That's correct?
Yes. That's
okay. And so because of that, I don't feel like it is appropriate for me as a homeowner to tell other homeowners what to do with their property, because I want people to respect my freedom, and so I would therefore respect theirs. So that's just sort of a commentary and a window into my values as a community member. My next question is then related to infrastructure. I heard your description tonight, and familiar with what the comp plan says about how we're preparing to kind of scale infrastructure to changes that occur throughout the city. So is it fair to say that infrastructure is being planned for in this comprehensive plan, and that we're expecting that infrastructure over the next 10 years will evolve as neighborhoods change?
Yes, that's the intent of the plan, is to accommodate that growth.
Yeah, and so and that's just I think a bit of misinformation that we were hearing, that there was no infrastructure planning, when clearly there is a great deal of infrastructure planning included in the comprehensive plan as we look at neighborhoods that may change, and we don't have a crystal ball. We can't predict how many of those properties that are have these new designations will change. Because we just can't know. People are going to be free to do what they want to with their property. And then the last thing I would just say is that we hear a lot about neighborhood character, and this sort of connects to my concept of my neighbors are free to do with their property what they choose to do with their property, is that neighborhood character is just not a convincing argument for me as a community member. I just am too aware of a history that uses that as a dog whistle to exclude incoming members of a community, and that's often based on people of different classes, races, and national origins. And I don't feel comfortable working to uphold a system that was intended to and designed to exclude people. So I appreciate the work that our staff did. We hired a consultant a couple years ago to put together the DEI plan, and we were warned that neighborhood character is often used as a tool to exclude. And so, I understand that people love their neighborhoods. I love my neighborhood. I love my home. I love the street that I live on. And I know that I'm free to do with my property what I'm legally allowed to do with my property. But I would not feel comfortable saying, I don't want my neighbors to change their house because I like my neighborhood the way that it is. Those arguments just aren't in alignment with my values. They're not logically consistent to me either. So when I hear members of the community coming forward in an effort to convince me and my colleagues to make changes to a plan that has had so much effort put into it by members of our staff, by members of our community, by our planning commission, by members of council. I don't think we have a number of how many public engagement opportunities, but it's dozens of public engagement opportunities over the course of the last 3 years. I don't feel comfortable making changes to the comprehensive plan based on the information and arguments that I've heard. So thank you for listening, and thank you for answering questions. Appreciate it.
Councilmember Dodd.
Thank you. Thank you for the update. There's not a lot left for me to say that other people haven't covered. I do really appreciate everyone that came out to our split across 2 Tuesdays council meeting and dealt with us through the power outage and everything. I think what was alarming to me was the number of people who said, I haven't read the plan, but someone showed up at my house and said that I should be upset about X. And it was different if you were in Maywood or Queensboro. And it was just a lot of weird sort of red herrings thrown in, like the idea that I think this was only a few commenters, but that where each of us lives in Bothell isn't affected, which is demonstrably untrue. But to counter that, I would have to make a map of our houses, and I'm not super comfortable with that. Or the idea that we could meet our targets with the no action alternative and ADUs. We know that's not true. It's spelled out in the plan, but that's something that was repeated quite a bit. The idea that this lot in Queensboro will have 13 units, also impossible looking at the lot and applying our development regulations. But these things get repeated and are taken as fact, and then we lose. People don't even read the plan at that point. I appreciate especially the people who came out and said, I read it and I have this question or that question. And I'm very comfortable with the fact that those questions have been evaluated. And I assume emails like Mr. Bouffard's from earlier today are pending a response. I just want to confirm that, because he did, especially the 110 feet typo. I know that's a Scrivener's error, but yeah. But I would hope that people, especially people who've participated in this process before, being a 30-year resident myself, I never heard of a comp plan before today. So I think that we did a very remarkable job. I had parents at my kids' school talk to me about it. Like, the communication here has been excellent. And of the people that I asked, what else would you have wanted to see in the communication plan? The only thing I wasn't sure if we did was post a notice at the library. There were mailers, there were emails, there were all kinds of things. I remember the big, like, I think of them as public works, where the text changes. I don't know if they're exclusively for public works, but advertising comp plan open houses. They were across the city. As a 30 years Snohomish County resident of Bothell, I can't tell you how many times I've felt included in this. And talking to people in Queensboro, where I grew up, when they were here at the meeting, hearing about like no sidewalks on Meridian. I used to walk on Meridian as a child. It's where I had a friend over there. It was a common thing, but factually, comp plans like the past have not resulted in sidewalks. They have not resulted in affordable housing in Bothell. They have resulted in lots of us being priced out and using neighborhood character, which is just an amorphous phrase that either means something different to everyone, so it kind of means nothing. It's not defined when we talk about it in this context, to sort of justify doing the same thing. We're not after the same result. We're after a better city that serves more people. We don't represent 30-year resident Amanda more than we represent a 2-year resident or someone who works here but can't afford to live here. That idea is nonsense. So I really appreciate that the plan, honestly, is it exactly what we've done before? No, by design. And I appreciate that it is seeking a better future than what we've seen in the past, because I've seen how my neighborhood has grown and changed in the past, and it hasn't been perfect. It hasn't served most of the city. It has served existing property owners very well, but I don't think that is the only people that we represent. And I'm really excited to see what comes of this. Thank you.
All right, I'm not going to put too fine a point on some of these things because they've already been covered. But I believe, tell me if I understand this correctly, we get growth targets and we need to show enough capacity that it's realistic that those growth targets could actually happen.
That's correct.
Okay. So if we have, just say 10,000 unit growth target and we have 10,000 units of capacity, we know that not every eligible property will get redeveloped over the course of this comp plan. So that's just not the way this works, right?
Correct.
Perfect. And in this, are we meeting our growth targets or are we going beyond?
Within the draft plan?
Yeah.
We are meeting our growth targets. Okay. And that's what that 5-year check-in is meant to do.
Yeah.
To show us how we're doing.
Perfect. We have heard some people point at the selection of the preferred alternative or the hybrid option and state that council members have been exempted from upzoning. Has there been any concern given to where we live in this process?
Nope.
Honestly, if there was, you're doing it wrong because like my neighborhood is going to residential M2. All right, if my math is correct, in like our 7,200 neighborhood where I live, 7,200 is about 6.25 lots per acre. And you mentioned earlier in the meeting that after House Bill 1110, every lot is eligible for 4 units in the city. So if we multiply 6.5 by 4, we get right about 25 units per acre. And that's kind of the base density in Bothell that's legal right now.
Correct.
Perfect. So going to 25 units is not a crazy upzone. It's essentially already legal.
Right.
Thank you. We have some folks in the community who have served honorably on our city councils and planning commissions in the past, and I'm sure they understand the process and the rules from 20 years ago very well, and I'm equally sure they don't want to spread disinformation in the community. Unfortunately, that's what's happening. I am wondering if you guys would be willing to sit down with some of them just to make sure that their understanding of the comp plan is accurate so that they would be able to accurately represent it as they talk about it in the community.
Absolutely. Happy to answer any questions. I met with somebody last Wednesday and answered a lot of their questions from Tuesday night.
Awesome.
It was a good conversation.
Thank you for having that conversation. That's really all I wanted to say right now. I'll probably have a little bit more to say next week, but ultimately I want the character of my neighborhood to be such that it welcomes my kids when they grow up and move out by having something that they can afford to move into. And I think the people in a neighborhood make up far more of the character of the community than what the buildings look like. And I'm way more concerned with people than with buildings. And, like I said in the State of the City address, where are my kids supposed to live? Like, they're not going to have $1 million to buy a house when they move out. And I don't think them being able to live in my neighborhood would ruin the character of it. So that's not a question. You don't need to answer that. But thank you guys so much for your time. I really appreciate this. I really appreciate with your willingness to meet with members of the community and just make sure that we have an accurate understanding of what's happening going out into the community as we go into next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Should I kick it back to the city manager so he can kick it back to them, or what are we? Is that all we got?
Yes, we knew that would be a longer than average staff report, so that's what we have tonight.
Perfect. Next up is council committee reports, community reports, and conversations. Councilmember Alders.
Yeah, I'll kick us off with just pointing council to our email. The Eastside Human Services Forum sent their legislative priorities out to our legislators, and that was put together by community partners, member cities, who are all members of the Eastside Human Services Forum. And so there are sections on affordable housing, behavioral health, criminal justice, crisis response, food security, and special education funding. I did request that it would be forwarded to council, so it should be in your email. You're able to review that. Our legislative agenda packet does reference the Eastside Human Services Forum legislative agenda as well. So it's good for us to be aware of what are shared values with other cities on the east side. And so hope for the next legislative session. So that's my update. Thank you.
Oh, Councilmember Zorns, I didn't see the light.
Well, I wanted to make sure committee reports got taken care of first. Mine is a shout out to heroes. The power outage. I was looking at my PSC a lot during the power outage, and our power was out for 2 and some change days. And I watched other grids, other pockets of whoever uses my PSC knows the little shadowy areas. And I watched certain areas, go clear. And there was one area that stayed in the dark. And it was a manufactured home park right off of 522, the Lazy Wheels. And they stayed dark and they stayed dark. And, we worry about our invisible people here in Bothell who have challenges. And so I talked to our city manager, and so my shout out is, well, I'll get to that. I went down to Lazy Wheels and I spent about an hour talking with the folks there. Their challenges there. Some of them had people that they could go to, but the ones who were staying in their home, it was like a refrigerator. The metal siding just chilled them to the bone. And so staying out of power for 7+ days was a real hardship for some of the folks there. And I talked with the city manager of, what can the city do? And thinking about that long term, what could we do to help when the last really severe power outage that we had was a couple decades ago that I'm thinking of. We have power that goes out, but not for like a week. But during that time, during the conversations I had with our city manager, he said, it got back to me and he said, police and fire are checking on them. So those are my heroes. And when I went down to talk, just check and see how folks were doing and seeing if anyone wanted to talk, there was one of our officers already there checking on folks. So I'm grateful with the power outage. Our police and fire were already on it and checking on folks who were without power and making sure that they were okay. So that's my shout out to our most recent heroes.
Councilmember Mankey.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just going to bandwagon real quick. Shout out to Public Works for their excellent job with the street sweepers during the fall leaf drop. They were out, they were visible. I saw 0 flooding this year, which is amazing. I don't think I've seen a recent season where we haven't had any flooding. So thank you to the Public Works folks who are working hard all through the last couple months to make sure those storm drains were clear.
Councilmember Curd.
I want to do a shout out to our Parks Department and LTAC for how beautiful our town looks. I was commuting with a friend into town in the evening, and they saw the Christmas tree or the trees that were all lit up, and they were like, "Do you live at a Hallmark town?" And so it was really cool to kind of like say, "Yeah, that's my town," and it's all fancy and it looks so beautiful and welcoming. So shout out to everybody who's putting the lights up, and I can't wait to see a holiday lights map of neighborhoods to go and visit with friends and family. So looking forward to that.
Councilmember Dodd.
Just here to repeat my encouragement to go to the Snohomish County tomorrow, big old in-person gathering in Mukilteo a week from tomorrow. Please consider going. Thank you.
You want to go? All right. Just make sure you thank one of the departments that we haven't thanked already so that people don't feel bad, okay?
The executive department?
Yeah. I see you, Matt.
IT, making Wi-Fi work. I'm gonna switch it up a bit. I appreciate everything that was said here, but I wanted to reflect on something that happened last week. We had a wonderful group of community members show up. I mean, it was amazing. I loved seeing all the beautiful faces and seeing the council chambers full. I wish we've had all those beautiful people here every week. It would sure make our council meetings more lively. As you can see, we need more entertainment. in a good way. You know, it was okay for people to come yell and slander, and even some spewed some lies. I guess it's part of the job that I signed up for, that we signed up for. Although I don't see how yelling and slandering and lying is ever a good negotiation tactic that ever gets the best outcome for everyone, but to each their own. But to threaten me and my family, not because of the position I took or my policy positions, but because of who I am. Last week, the morning right after our beautiful gathering here, an anonymous coward threatened my and my family's safety and security. They specifically threatened me using racist and Islamophobic language. That coward threatened my safety and my family's safety because I am a Muslim and I'm an immigrant and I'm an Arab. This is just unacceptable. And frankly, none of us should be okay with that nonsense. Needless to say, law enforcement has been informed and are investigating the matter. This is not the city I chose to live in and raise my kids in. This is not the community that I came to love and to sacrifice my time and life to serve. I chose to sacrifice my time and life to ensure that my city, our city, is welcoming, inclusive, understanding, neighborly, compassionate, and accepting of everybody. Everybody. Not just one group, not just two groups, every single group and person who lives in our city. I hope that as we navigate our disagreements, we are courteous and respectful. It's okay to respectfully disagree on positions and policy, and it's even better to provide solutions to the problems, as some folks have done. But it is not okay to discriminate against people because of who they are as human beings. Let's remember to be civil to one another and that there's no room for hate and bigotry in Bothell. I don't deserve that, my family does not deserve that, and nobody else in Bothell deserves that. So everybody deserves to live here in comfort and security without the fear of being targeted by hate. And I hope this particular issue, it will be water under the bridge here in a few months, and we can move on without the hate and bigotry, because we do want to make Bothell welcoming to people like me and other people from all around who want to come and make Bothell home. So thanks, Mayor, for giving the time.
I mean, you won an election. You did kind of earn the time. And I'm sorry you and your family are going through that.
And I'll also just say that that like Rami and his family isn't alone. That others of us up here on council have been targeted for who we love, for who we are, and that's a problem throughout our community. One of the reasons why I felt inspired to get involved at Bothell City Council is because one day I think I was just probably using the parking garage and going out onto the plaza. So I wasn't really coming to City Hall, but I was using the public benefit of our parking at City Hall. And I saw a sign on the door that said, it was a poem, and it was "Bothell has no room for hate," was the like ending couplet. And I just thought, I'm so grateful to live in a city that puts this message up and stands behind it as staff, as elected officials, and as community members. And so it's really troubling to me to see members of our community being targeted for who they are, when we know that, you know, as a government entity, we're not allowed to discriminate based on those characteristics. And I would hope that as Americans, we would share the values of not discriminating against our fellow neighbors based on those same characteristics that are not legal to discriminate against. So thank you.
I'm going to be the second one to jump ahead of the mayor. Deputy Mayor, I really appreciate you sharing that. I think that we've all, most people on council I have talked to in the past about safety issues, and I didn't want to talk about the threats made against you earlier, but that is why I brought up spreading misinformation. Because when we spread misinformation and we say things that aren't true or that we can't back up, and we rile people up and we make them angry and we raise that level of anger, that's what results in these threats. We all have a duty to discuss things factually and not create anger out of just artificial things to rile people up to get them to agree with you, because that leads to situations like the safety of the deputy mayor and his family. And your family, Deputy Mayor Rami, very much belongs here. I'm a big fan of all of you, but especially your son, and I'm super glad that you're here.
Councilmember Zorns?
Yeah, I just want to echo that. I also have had a death threat just simply because I'm guessing I had a different opinion than them. And the fact that people can so easily leap into words that they may mean or not mean, we don't know, but the intention doesn't leave you with warm, fuzzy, safe, walk out your front door in the middle of the night feeling. So, and I don't know what the solution is, except to just consistently not tolerate and pursue what you can pursue. It's not a fun place, and I'm sorry you're going through that.
All right. Everybody appears to be done. Yeah, and especially as we go through a process and like the public hearing last week where we had quite a few people here and animated, I would just encourage everybody, particularly those who have served in the past, who understand the work that this requires and understand that we're all up here because we want to make Bothell a better place to live, even when we disagree with each other. Like no matter if we all disagree or something, I'm deeply confident that everybody up here is here because they care about this place and they want to make it a better place to live. So I would just encourage us to live in the terms of the real. Let's have policy disagreements. Let's talk about how many units per acre should be in this zone, not the council is bought and paid for and they don't care about us living here. And when you spread that kind of rhetoric and you allow people to use your words and misinformation in that way, you don't make it a better place to live in Bothell. And you should. Because Bothell's a place worth living in, and it's a place worth trying to make better, not worse. All right, and with that, I would love a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Mankey and a second from Councilmember Dodd to approve the consent agenda. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? City Clerk?
Thank you. Please say yes or no when I call your name. Councilmember Zorns?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember Alderks?
Yes.
Councilmember Kurd?
Yes.
Councilmember Mankey?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
All right, and before we move on to our light rest of the agenda tonight, you can stay seated, Kyle, because we need to approve the budget. But I'm going to call a 10-minute break. Actually, I'm going to call a 13-minute break. It's 7:27, and we'll return and be back here at 7:40. All right, welcome back, everyone. Oh, we got to. Okay, cool.
We got to start recording. Hold on.
Perfect.
Recording in progress.
I figured that was an easier way to make sure get everybody's attention to start the meeting again than, well, anything else. Welcome back. We are at the Ordinances and Resolutions section of the council meeting, and first up is Agenda Bill 24-196, the approval of the 2025-2026 biennial budget. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening again, City Council. Tonight, there are 3 actions before you all related to the adoption of the budget. And as we open up, I just wanted to recall back to where we started in these conversations as far back as June, but really more in earnest here in this fall. The first, I just want to remind and reassure and reinforce that The budget that was presented to you is a balanced budget across all funds, and that is the commitment that we make to of course provide a balanced budget and then navigate through the year, the 2 years ahead, keeping it that way. And I'm really thankful for the position that past councils and this city council has put the community of Bothell in terms of being well positioned. As we hear about some communities that are facing other challenges, Bothell has some advantages that we are benefiting from, where we can make responsible choices and manage the community's funds well. I'm thankful for that. The budget that was put before you as well, also, again, I think in the transmittal I referenced of there's not a lot of surprise there, because it's informed by primarily two sources. One is the community, and we do rely on a community survey that is put out and was consulted, and themes from that survey informed the budget and informed the city council on what you're looking for. Also, what was informative and helpful is the council vision and priorities that staff had to work from. And we're in the middle of that process, and it'll soon be time to update the priorities, and some of them will be completed, some of them will be in process and can get moved along, and some of them maybe it'll be time to swap out. But what I will say is it's been very helpful to know what's important and being able to respond to that. Some of the things then that came up that, again, we heard from the community, those are themes that we've heard about tonight too. Again, it comes up in different ways, but at the heart of it is people want to see Bothell taken care of. And that starts with things that we often consider infrastructure. Maintaining our roads, maintaining what we already have, looking to improve upon it, of looking for more sidewalks, making sure that people are able to get around in different ways. So maintaining what already exists, also looking towards things that we cherish in terms of parks, trails, and open spaces to get along and get out with other people. Looking for housing and different needs. We're looking for having a response to public safety in different forms. And again, we've talked throughout the last couple of budgets of how needing to make sure that the appropriate resource is able to be deployed when people need help most, and where they do turn to their local government to provide that service. And then also not only just preserving our parks, but also looking to the future and looking ahead to 2025 and starting the conversation with our community about updating the parks and recreation open spaces plan, their pros plan of dreaming of what will our spaces be. One of the things, though, too, that I really wanted to touch upon as a thank you as well is something that we look at internally a lot is how our services are interconnected. We are organized, like many organizations are, by departments. We have an org chart and that sort of thing. But it's very difficult to find anything that the city provides to this community that resides within one of those departments. It is a means for organization and for clarity and for knowing where to turn. But you'll even see on our website, if you go to the departments tab, many of the services that are listed aren't departments. We don't want the community to have to know our org chart, but we are organized for efficiencies that way. But we do work together quite a bit. And I heard a couple themes already tonight in terms of shout outs around what we value in terms of having a common purpose across the organization, and how do we make sure that we're working together in a way that then the people we're serving, they see a reflection of that, which builds trust, collaboration, and makes the services we provide trusted. And so, for example, we heard the thank you around in the comp plan of having the traffic message boards advertising the comprehensive plan. And I've had, the police chief mention to me a few times of how this is the first comprehensive plan in his 30 years career where he was consulted, from the police department standpoint of there's work to be done. Also, thinking about the last couple of activations of our emergency response in terms of a declared emergency and then also of a power outage. And I thank you for the kudos and thinking through of, not only we had our police and fire departments, but we've also, from the last budget, added resources around human services and how in our activation of an emergency now, the last two things we've activated, there's been a specific functional call out of human services, of checking on people in need, and how that is now part of how we respond to events. And I think that's reflected in this budget as well, is to continue and build on that. There's investments to continue to make that that trust and the service stronger around things like communications and engagement. And so we're investing in places, again, of where we know there's a priority and there's a need. So, again, thank you for the putting again, the community of Bothell in a good position financially. I'm thankful for the work of the executive leadership team, which did look at the prioritization of investments, not by department to by department, how we're organized, but overall in service to the community. And I'm thankful for the navigation of our finance team as well, including the staff who are here in support in case there's any questions, and making sure that they're here to support their exceptional leader, Kwan Wong, our finance director. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Kwan to walk through the actions that are before you tonight, and then before that takes place, if there's any remaining questions, we're here to answer them. Kwan?
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Kyle. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and City Council members. So tonight, we're asking you to take the following actions to consider approval of the final 2025-26 biennial budget. The second item is to adopt the final 2025 to 2031 capital facilities plan. And the last item is to adopt the 2025 fees schedule. And to do a quick review, although we have appeared before you many times, I think it's worth a refresher. For the first item, the 2025 to 26 budget, it is $380 million for the biennium. We don't distinguish between general fund and non-general fund. It is, again, one city, one budget. So in 2025, we are proposing a $205.5 million expenditure, and in 26, $171.5 million. And within that, as Kyle said, we are investing close to $4 million a year on new investments. We were able to maintain our operating and maintenance budget at zero growth. That allows us to have other opportunities to invest in new initiatives. The second item is the 25 to 2031 capital facilities plan. The total amount is $440 million for the next 7 years. They include 92 projects. And again, just to remind everybody, 51% of the funding is coming from grants and partnership, like our Sound Transit agency. The last item before you is the 25 fee schedule. We are keeping it simple for next year. It is general across the board, 3.6% increase because of the CPI, just keeping up with inflation. We are not increasing the others because of cost recovery, limited by statute and market conditions. Early next year, we'll be coming back to you to look at the community development fees because of the cost recovery recommendations. So stay tuned for that. So if I could answer any questions before we actually go to the ordinance, asking for your motion to approve.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I'll start and actually say something very positive and uplifting. Thank you so much, Finance Department, for doing this work. I really appreciate it. I like the cautiously optimistic work. It's great to be in this position, I agree. And it's great to see investment in human services. in inclusion of the community, balancing and focusing on investments in the future for our city, just like we're doing the comp plan. We're setting ourselves up now for the long term, right? So we're building a solid foundation. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Councilmember Alders.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation, for all of the work that went into coming to this decision tonight. I want to put in a shout out to the Capital Facilities Plan, how there are projects that cover our city, and that there were members of our community who, very loudly requested some projects, and, and that those are represented here in this plan as well. And so I'm just really glad to have not just to see our vision and our capital facilities plan, our comp plan, and our budget, all of those things kind of aligning around the values that have been communicated to us by our community, but that we then also bring to our roles on council. It really is, I just think, a beautiful way that things are coming together. And I think that is in large part to our city manager for putting together a executive leadership team where people are working together across departments. So thank you, Kyle, for bringing Quan in and trying to bring it all together, because it really is nice to see it how it works together. So thank you.
Councilmember Mankey.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have a lot of meaningful things to add, but I did want to just thank all staff for all of these deliverables. The entire leadership team and supporting staff members have done a lot of work at the end of this year. I mean, a lot of it was leading up to the end of this year, but all of these deliverables are the result of really, really hard work and collaboration across teams, and you don't see that in every city. So just wanted to echo my thank you, especially for the budget. One of the reasons why I ran was concerns around budget over several cycles, and those concerns from this cycle and last cycle have been completely erased because of the work that I've seen and the graphs showing pushed out lines crossing for our general fund expenditures and revenues, and this team's done a great work getting there and allowed us to make really good investments in things like Racer and the Crisis Response Center and many other things that are very valuable to our community. So I'm grateful for that, grateful to vote on this tonight, and excited to pass this.
Councilmember Kurt.
Thank you. I wanted to say that the last time that we had met to discuss the budget, I had asked for an update on ARPA funds that were used by the city as part of recovery from COVID. And I want to thank you for attachment 2. It's really clear, and I think it makes me feel so proud of the way that we've used the funding. I know that previous councils kind of set the vision and the guiding principles around it, but it really goes to show, how the investments that we've been making are really continuing to facilitate recovery and help our small businesses and the people who live here and ongoing city operations. So thank you for that transparency. I really like the way it's laid out. It's so clear and easy to read. So that's a great resource for people who are wondering where that money went. On a maybe bigger scale, I'll echo what other council members said. And when I first kind of looked at the budget, I printed it out. Double-sided, 4 pages per sheet. And one of the first pages that you turn to is like a picture of our faces. Like, oh my gosh, what is that? But that's kind of, it's poignant because the budget is people. It's the city of Bothell is an organization of people, and the staff that are buried in each line item are producing an enormous body of work that's going to help our community members and everyone who lives and works here or even just comes through to be safe and happy and healthy. So my shout out is for the staff. That might be a line item, but we see you and we thank you for your service and we thank you for being part of our community.
I don't see the light. Oh, there it is. Perfect. By the time this year is done, like one of my main goals is I just want you to push the light.
I'm deathly afraid of feedback.
But you push the light when it's time to talk.
I know, and now it's cool,
Okay.
but I just, maybe it's just old school. Feedback used to be more of a thing.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to be fast. Something that my husband says all the time is that when we're spending money, and I'll concede he's right, is that every dollar that we spend, somebody had to earn. And I feel like those dollars come to the city with a great amount of trust. And I trust. Trust is a hard thing to earn and easy to lose. I really trust the hands that our budget has been shaped by. And so thank you for that. Thank you for what you've done. And, for future city council members, anybody who's entertaining running for city council in the future, please take care of this budget. It comes with a lot of sweat and tears, and it's easy to blow the gains that we've got here. And we've got a good groundwork here. So I'd like to, hope and pray that it stays healthy. So thank you for the work that you've done.
Councilmember Dodd.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone. I missed earlier during council conversations when everybody thanked a department. Thank you, everyone. And if we ever want to save money, less photos of us randomly sprinkled in things would be a great option. But I'm really proud of this budget, and I'm really pleased that we don't have budget problems that other cities have right now. And that speaks directly to the work that everyone in this room and everyone that you work with has done. So thank you.
I didn't know that human services were a part of our emergency response until tonight. So thank you. That's really cool. And it is super cool to see investments that we've made used in ways that I wouldn't have even thought of to help benefit our community when they need it the most. So that made me smile and put me in a good mood when you said that. In terms of this, just thanks for a responsible, thoughtful process. We've had a lot of opportunities to go over the details of this. Also, thank you for a short presentation tonight, because we didn't need to see the details again. The change over the last few budget cycles from my first budget here in Bothell, we had council members making amendments on the dais the day of adoption that passed. This process is just so much different and so much better and so much lower stress, and I think far more reflective of what our community wants to see from us. As I reflected on this meeting, it's one of those times where it's kind of like the opposite of the frog in the pot getting boiled. You don't realize how much better it's gotten because it just keeps getting slowly better. And this was one of those nights for me when I was able to look back at, 4 years ago and be like, oh, we've come a long way. I have one question for the city manager, for Kyle. With the conversation we've had the last few weeks about public engagement and reaching out to our community and how we can do that better, can you talk about some of the additional investments that we're making in communication, as well as some of the organizational structural changes around that so we can reach our community better?
Absolutely. I'll do my best, and Quan will fill in anything I missed. And also, I may call upon Becky Ranger, our assistant city manager, if I miss anything.
If anybody else you'd rather have answer it, feel free.
I'm happy to. Yeah. Within the budget, a few of the investments that I reflect on, again, this was really guided by what we've heard from the community and also from reading through the council priorities and vision of how do we come together. And so as you may be familiar in our current budget and our current form, we do have communications and engagement positions, and we want to strengthen upon that. And so what's before you would increase that investment by adding a communications manager position in the executive office, as well as 2 additional communications specialist positions. And the idea of that is that they'll all be centralized into one team and continue to coordinate with our existing communication and engagement staff that are throughout the city as well. And, it's not always about communication and engagement staff. Sometimes it's the people who are doing the work who say, here's what I'm doing, help me tell the story, right? So wanting to add resources, though, to be able to get that information out differently, more, and being out in the community more. So there are a total of 3 positions that will do that. They will report through the executive office, and that is mainly just in that when you look at the organization of the city, sometimes there is the place of where are the pieces that touch every department, and it goes in the executive office. So our plan is to move forward with that and start filling those positions once we have the approval.
Thank you. And I would just say, we've all heard a budget is a moral document, but a budget really just reflects values. And we've had a lot of people come the last few weeks saying, you need to do a better job of communicating. And it's really easy for us up here to feel attacked and get defensive and be like, oh, but no, look at the process. But I think it's easier to just take a step back and say, no, we actually agree. We would like to do a better job of communicating, and that requires investments. And we have had these investments in our budget since well before the conversation of the last couple weeks has started. And if you're watching out there, your council cares about this. We want to make sure we communicate with you as best we can, and we're making appropriate investments to do so. So I think with that, I would love a motion or some combination of motions.
I would move to approve the ordinance adopting the final 2025-2026 biennial budget.
Second.
Ooh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Alders. I think Councilmember Curd. Oh, okay. Well, my apologies. But I've got a motion from Councilmember Mankey and a second from Councilmember Curd to approve the 2025-2026 biennial budget. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Or did we just all do that? All right, City Clerk?
Thank you. Please say yes or no when I call your name. Councilmember Zorns?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember Alders?
Yes.
Councilmember Curd?
Yes.
Councilmember Mankey?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
All right. I would love to entertain the next motion for the capital facilities plan. Councilmember Dodd.
Thank you. I move to approve a resolution adopting the 2025 to 2031 Capital Facilities Plan.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Dodd and a second from Councilmember Mankey, who comes alive during budget season. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? City Clerk?
Please say yes or no when I call your name. Councilmember Zorns?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember Alders?
Yes.
Councilmember Curd?
Yes.
Councilmember Mankey?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
All right, next up, I would love to get a motion to approve the resolution adopting the 2025 fee schedule as presented. Councilmember Curd.
I move to approve the resolution establishing the 2025 fee schedule.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Curd and a second from Councilmember Dodd. I was a little nervous there. To approve the resolution adopting the 2025 fee schedule as presented. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? City Clerk?
Please say yes or no when I call your name. Councilmember Zorns?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember Alders?
Yes.
Councilmember Curd?
Yes.
Councilmember Mankey?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Quan. I think Kyle's probably going to stay here, but I think you're probably good. Next up on our agenda is consideration of a second extension period for negotiation of a purchase and sale agreement with Bothell United Methodist Church for the sale of Lot P South. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'll be brief this evening, but certainly happy to answer any questions. What's before you is a request to extend an additional 50 days of the terms of the letter of intent that Council adopted earlier this year. As you may recall, the letter of intent frames what would come forward in a purchase and sale agreement for the City Council to consider in terms of conveying property to the Bothell United Methodist Church for an affordable housing project. The letter of intent was something that was negotiated carefully, and again, Council has seen that, knowing this is the basis of what an agreement going forward would look like. We are now in the phase of where it's getting all of those details built into a substantial document that forms an agreement that will last, if you want to look at it from the standpoint of the phase of taking a plan and making it happen, about 5 years, but it's over a term of, the agreement then is over a term of 99 years. So it makes sense that the foundation of that agreement, there's going to be a lot of specificity, and there's a lot of investment of time, energy, resource, and talent that goes into that. My commitment to council has been to take the direction that I received from you of negotiating a purchase and sale agreement based on that LOI and bringing you back an agreement that you could consider for adoption. Again, it doesn't mean we'll never presume what the outcome will be, but something that you can consider and say, yes, that matches what we were looking for, or give me direction to go back and renegotiate. So I was before you in October asking for an extension. At that time, we were awaiting to get an agreement to be able to evaluate and to see how does this line up with the LOI. We have now passed that period of where we're now in a phase of active negotiation of there's an agreement, we'll be exchanging ideas and also working on scheduling a negotiation session to get everybody in a room, and we're really hopeful that that conversation will lead to a document, again, that the council can consider in an upcoming meeting. I am very optimistic, we got a shout out to a budget workshop back from April of 2022 of when one of our finance staff said he was cautiously optimistic, and coming from Ted Rainen, cautiously optimistic is a pretty enthusiastic response. So I'll say cautiously optimistic, but it'll only be in the Ted tone of optimistic, that we will have something much sooner than 50 days in a state of where all parties agree, yes, this is what we'll bring forward for council consideration. And as you also know, we are coming up at the end of the year, and the page will turn to January 2025 far before any of us are realized. So my honest hope is that before this next extension is over, there's an agreement that you'll be considering in this room for consideration. If that weren't to happen, we will have a discussion with some options of what would you like to do. But again, as has been stated, to do an agreement well of this size and magnitude does take a lot of time, but we also intentionally wanted to break the period up in terms of when are we looking at things into smaller chunks than just saying, we'll have a negotiation period of a year, because oftentimes as you schedule out work, it's in the last bit, and it's in the last quarter of that time frame that action takes place. I think all parties involved, we want to have clarity. I know the community, I know the council, and I know that those of us working on the negotiations, we want to make sure that there's an agreement that is worthy of consideration. So with that, I will turn it over to any questions, and then again, before you is a resolution that would extend an additional 50 days.
If nobody has any questions, I will accept a motion. Councilmember Alders?
It's more of a comment than a question, but mainly I just appreciate I think the care and sensitivity that has been taken in this process, especially to address concerns made by council around is everybody playing fair, and is everybody being a good neighbor and working together well to come to this? And so I'm glad to hear the reassurance that conversations are seemingly productive and moving forward. And I will take your cautious optimism and just say that I appreciate the ongoing and continued effort to come to an agreement that can be legally binding and fair to all parties. So thank you so much.
If no questions or comments, I would love to accept a motion. Councilmember Curd?
I move to adopt a resolution amending Resolution 1539, extending the period of negotiation for a purchase and sale agreement with the Bothell United Methodist Church for the sale of Lot P South.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Curd for the recommended action and a second from Councilmember Alders. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? I would like to speak to the motion. I just, again, want to say thanks to staff. Like, nobody daydreams of lots of extensions, but extensions are the result of being careful and making sure that we're all in this together, and we're happy to extend because we want to see a cool project done. And just thanks again to Bothell United Methodist for being very patient over the last, I'm not even sure how many years at this point in time, and I will happily be voting yes. City Clerk?
Thank you. Please say yes or no when I call your name. Councilmember Zorns?
No.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember Alders?
Yes.
Councilmember Curd?
Yes.
Councilmember Menke?
No.
Councilmember Dodd?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Yes.
Passes 5-2 with council members Zorns and Menke in the negative.
All right. Next up, we have appointments. Selection of a voting delegate for the Sound Cities Association annual meeting. City Manager.
Not much to say here other than just for those following along. Sound Cities Association is a membership of cities that are on the east side of King County, east side of the lake. I won't say what that excludes. And the city of Bothell is a member. The agreement for Sound Cities Association is that there is a board of directors and there are elections for that board that take place before December 31st of each year. Bothell, it participates in the North Caucus for voting, and the North Caucus will be meeting in an online meeting on ominously Friday the 13th at 1 p.m. And each member city is asked to have one voting representative selected. Staff has a form to fill out that we will take care of once we know who that is, and then information will be sent to the delegate of logging in and participating in that meeting. And with that, I will answer any questions that I can, but suspect I can turn it over to you to discuss and vote.
I will just put it out there that I'm currently on the board and am planning on attending this meeting anyway. And if anybody feels really strongly about going, don't think I'm going to stand in your way. But I'm happy to go. Councilmember Menke.
I would support that.
You don't want more meetings in your life in the middle of the day?
I will be out of town, so I won't be able to.
Councilmember Dodd?
I really don't want to stand in front of your dreams, so I too will support that.
Then keep that on and make a motion.
I move that Mayor Thompson is our delegate to represent Bothell for the North Caucus meeting on December 13th.
Second.
All right, I got a motion from Councilmember Dodd and a second from Councilmember Menke. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? City Clerk?
Thank you. Please say yes or no when I call your name. Councilmember Zorns?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Regrettably, yes.
Councilmember Alder?
Thankfully, yes.
Councilmember Curd?
Yes.
Councilmember Menke?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd?
Enthusiastically, yes.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
Thank you, City Clerk. Thank you, everybody. I think we got out of here a little earlier than expected tonight. Go team. With that, we're adjourned.